Hello and welcome to the next instalment of the lessons based around Paper 2 Thematic Studies, and today we are going to be looking at family and relationships. Throughout this lesson we're going to look at the types of families, the roles that each of those members of the family have. We're going to look around the issues of homosexuality. We're going to look at marriage and divorce, as well as the new AQA exam question, the 1-mark exam question, which is replacing the old 2-mark exam question, which is still currently in this year's exam paper. Any changes that I talk about, any new exam questions we mentioned in these lessons, they are for the 2026 exams and then moving on into the future. So, to start off then, we need to understand what the different types of family are. So when we think about a family, this is often what we think of. We think of a mum and a dad and children. This is what we would refer to as being a nuclear family. Now, in some cases, nuclear families can stay together forever. However, at the moment there is a large period of divorce happening where marriages aren't lasting and people are separating. What's then happening is that people are also remarrying. And that means you could have children from one partner but marry into a family that already has children. This would be referred to as a step family. So if you have a stepfather, a stepmother, a stepbrother, it's because you have been in a family where someone else has married into that pre-existing family, and therefore those sorts of somewhat connections have been made, but they're not quite there. They're one step removed. Okay? But you also have then adopted families as well. It could be that there could be a mother and a father who have stayed together their entire lives, but who just aren't able to have children, and therefore need to adopt for be able to have that family that they've always wanted. However, you can also sometimes end up with single parent households. Now that could be just the father with the children, or more commonly just the mother with the children. This is what we call single parenting or single parent households. This can be seen as something that is less positive by the eyes of many religious practitioners, on the basis that they believe that both the mother and the father have very important roles when it comes to the raising of the children. It's an extremely hard thing to be able to raise a child by yourself because you're having to play both roles, both mother and father. That does not mean that it's unsuccessful. There are plenty of cases of people who are single parents who do a terrific job. However, for many Christians, for example, they would rather children be brought up in a household that has both a mother and a father, which then contrasts this idea of same-sex parents. In some cases, especially in the modern world, where homosexuality, things like that, is becoming more accepted, we see these homosexual couples who then want to have children. They adopt, or they go through a surrogacy, so at least one of them is a biological parent of the child. And this, again, is something that is generally accepted in the modern sort of atheist society. However, in the religious world, we are still trying to get to the point of acceptance of that. We have definitely moved in the right direction ever since gay marriage was legalized back in 2013. As churches ever since have started making steps forward, I think it was last year, or churches said that they would do a trial run of homosexual marriage after the Methodist Church stepped forward and said that they are now allowing gay marriage. But the idea is that parents, in the eyes of religion, definitely should be a married couple. So the role of parents then is a really simple one. They should love and protect their children at all costs. Okay, so when you see your parents going above and beyond for you, that's because one of their jobs is to love and protect you and to ensure that you have everything that you need. In the Bible, we have this quotation here. It basically says anyone who causes any issues for children, they should be killed. Now, this sounds a little bit extreme, especially when we then look at the book that it was written in. This was in the book of Matthew. In fact, this is something that actually Jesus said. Jesus said that they should have imagine a huge boulder hung around their neck, and then they have to walk out into the sea with that boulder. They're of course going to drown, they're going to die. So this idea then that people and adults especially, specifically parents, should protect, should love, should cherish their children, because anyone who does not effectively deserves not to be alive anymore, which sounds, as I said, really extreme coming from Jesus, but goes to show the importance of children and the protection of them. It's also the job of the parents to teach children good morals, understanding what is right and what is wrong. We see here in the book of Proverbs, children need the adults to know exactly what's going on. When you are a baby and you can't verbalize what it is you're thinking or what it is you're feeling, you have to look and see, and you pick up from what other people are doing to ensure that you have an understanding of what right and wrong actually is. In situations then when you do something wrong, there should be some sort of repercussions. Actions should always have consequences. That way you know what action is a good action and what action is a bad action. Good actions are ones that end in a positive consequence. Bad actions are the ones that end in a negative consequence. So we have these idea of not only should we love and cherish them, but we also need to educate them as well. Finally, the other role of parents is to raise their children to know God. And this is because God is very fond of children, because children, they believe anything blindly with such super faith. When you think of when you were a child and you think about Christmas time and the thought of Santa coming down the chimney and leaving presents at your Christmas tree, and these ideas are things that children believe in so heavily with no evidence whatsoever. They have complete and utter faith. So in fact, there's a quote in the Bible that says they should enter the kingdom of heaven with a childlike spirit, with this unwavering faith that should grow the more you know God. However, it is also instructed to parents that they need to be bringing them up in the training instruction of God. So whenever you have a child, you should be raising them following the instructions of God's. However, this isn't it. There are also roles for the children as well. So you young people, make sure you are listening up to this. The first thing is you need to listen. Okay, you have to listen to your parents, listen to what they're telling you. Okay, listen to your father's instructions and do not ignore your mother's teachings, highlighting the importance of listening to what they have to tell you, listening to what they have instructed you to do, and ensuring that you act accordingly. If you have been told to go and do something, go and do so. If you have been told this piece of information is really important to remember, so hold on to it, try your best to hold on to that information. The other important role for children is to make sure that not only should you listen and follow your parents' teachings and instructions, you also just have to respect them and honour them and show them love as well. The reason for this is because it's one of the 10 Commandments. Now, although this quotation here is from the book of Colossians, earlier in the book of Exodus, it demands children to honour your mother and father. So in this quotation here, it says, children, obey your parents in everything. You're doing so not just because it's a loving thing to do for your parents, but also because it's pleasing to God. Okay? So that's a really important factor for children. Not only should you be listening, but you need to honour your parents in everything you do. So you need to be living the way that they would want you to live. You need to be thinking the way that they would want you to think. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute now to get these quotations written down if you haven't already done so, and we will be moving on in 3, 2, and 1. Now we need to get on to looking at the roles of individuals within the family. So the roles of men, for example, are to work hard to provide a sustainable living source, whether that be finances, bringing food home, whatever it might be, but working hard to ensure that the family has everything they need. This allows men to protect family and protect the household. Now, I do just want to highlight that this is a traditional Christian view. This is not something that I personally believe has to be the case. It also isn't something that the general public believes to be the case now. We are moving in a wave where women are becoming more and more accepted to be able to go and do the same things as men. So we'll talk about that though in a little second. If we look at then the roles of women, according to Christians, there are 2 main roles: to have children and to look after the family home. Now, the reason for these ideas actually stem all the way back from the story of Adam and Eve. When Adam and Eve disobeyed God and they were punished by being exiled from the Garden of Eden, it was said that Adam must work hard to be able to provide anything for his family. For Eve, childbirth was going to become a painful experience. So those gender stereotypes were set in stone from Adam and Eve. However, there is a liberal view. There is a view that is becoming more and more popular in the sort of more Protestant church as well as everyday society. And that is that men and women are equal. Therefore, these jobs can be interchangeable. Obviously, men can't literally give birth to children. However, what men can do is stay at home and look after the children and raise the child. If in a situation where the mother makes more money than the father, it might make more sense for the father to stay at home rather than the mother. So the mother can go off and work, bring home an income, bring home resources that are going to help the family, whereas the father can be the one to stay at home, raise the children, all that sort of stuff. So although we do have these gender roles, these gender stereotypes that are rooted in traditional Christianity, there is also this liberal view starting to shine through. That brings us then onto the views on homosexuality and the LGBTQ plus community. Homosexuality is just when you are attracted to someone of the same gender. And this is something that has caused a lot of conflict within the church, especially recently. As I said earlier, a push in the church for homosexuality to become more accepted. Now, fundamental Christians are going to disagree with homosexuality. Apologies for the typo in homosexual. This was something that was put together rather quickly. I do apologise. It should be homosexual. These ideas then of fundamental Christians, one of the big problems they have with homosexuality is that you cannot reproduce. You cannot have more children. And when you are instructed to do so, go forth and multiply, coming from that first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, it goes against everything that Bible says. If you're in a homosexual relationship, you can't necessarily create new life without having a woman involved. So if you are two men, you need a woman. If you are two women, you're going to need a man. So this idea that man and woman are both needed, therefore that's what the couple should be. Because they believe that you need both a man and a woman to effectively raise a child. Like we said earlier with the single parenting, this becomes a little bit of a touchy issue on the basis that actually there are plenty of people who are fully successful at raising their children in either a homosexual relationship or as a single parent. However, it does go a little bit deeper. According to fundamental Christians, homosexuality is actually sexually immoral and is sinful and something that should be punished. You have a quote here, "Man shall not lie with man," from the book of Leviticus. In fact, it later goes on to say that this is something that is detestable. It should be hated by people. However, this was written in a context of a time period where they were trying to build civilizations. They were trying to build up communities and families. People being in relationships that didn't produce children seemed a pointless task. And for many people, therefore, they argued that this was wrong. They can't be gay because, well, we need to have children. We need to grow these civilizations. Anyone who is not following that pattern clearly doesn't care about this community. So when we look all the way back then to those time periods, some of these instructions, some of these rules, some of these expectations start to make a little bit more sense. However, liberal Christians have a very strong argument to suggest that actually this is outdated now. We no longer live in a world where we need to have children. I was watching a documentary the other day where David Attenborough had said that the population had more than doubled in his lifetime. So when he was born, there was just under 4 billion people. We have now just surpassed the 8 billion people mark. What this means is that if people go and have throughout their entire lives not having kids, it's not going to be hugely detrimental. As long as there are some children being born, then what's the harm? Again, we come back to this idea that we should treat everyone equally. We should treat each other with respect, and we should love all people, irregardless of whether they are in a relationship that we can agree with or not. And in fact, within the church, there was the first gay bishop. He became a bishop in 2003. He came out in the 80s, I believe it was, and he became bishop in 2003, showing that some parts of the church accepted this idea of homosexuality. This then brings us on to looking at marriage. Now, marriage is just the legal binding of two consenting people over the age of 18. Now, it used to be that you could get married at the age of 16 with parental consent. However, a few years ago, this was overruled and made that you have to be 18 in order to get married. Now, part of being in a wedding is that you will say wedding vows, effectively a promise that you're saying to your partner to ensure that they know you're going to be with them no matter what, whether it be better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. This idea that you're always going to be together no matter how hard times get, it brings two people together. And it doesn't just bring them together for now, it brings them together until they part, until they have been separated by death. However, there is more to wedding vows according to Christians, and it's that final two sections of the vows. According to God's holy law, in the presence of God, I make this vow. And this then highlights the importance of marriage as actually one of the 7 sacraments in Catholic Christianity. This is no longer just a promise between two people, but it's also a promise between two people and God. This then forms a lot of the ideas that we face around divorce, because divorce is the legal ending of that marriage. Now, fundamental Christians are going to say that this is completely and utterly unforgivable on the basis that it's breaking a promise with God, because when you have said those wedding vows, you have committed your lives to each other and to God. But also, if you then remarry, let's say, for example, you have divorced and both you and your ex-wife or your ex-husband are still alive, any partner you then have would be considered adultery. And we know in the 10 Commandments, it says, thou shalt not commit adultery. And that's in the book of Exodus, when Moses had freed the Israelites from Egypt and had taken those instructions down to the Israelites who had forgotten their way. This is one of the most crucial rules for Christians to follow, not committing adultery. But we do have some issues here that liberal Christians do highlight. It can be, in some situations, the most loving thing. If the environment that your marriage is in is not a healthy one, then surely it is more loving to let you move apart from each other, where you no longer have to remain married. It allows everyone to be happy, but also potentially stops harm. If this was a situation where there was some level of abuse happening, it would almost be considered evil to force somebody to stay in that marriage if they did not want to. If they were being threatened or they were at risk, it's the more loving thing to allow that marriage to separate, shall we say. Now, there is a second alternative. However, this is a little bit more complicated. You also have this concept of annulment. Annulment is similar to divorce. It's the ending of official marriage. In order to make your marriage official, you have to do what they call consummating the marriage, which just means having sex. If you don't have sex, once you have been officially made man and wife, you have the opportunity for an annulment, say this was a mistake, this isn't something that I want, and I want to move away from this relationship now. It is not seen the same as divorce, and it is allowed to happen in Christianity. We now get on to looking at the AQA changes to the exam for next year. If you're part of any other exam board and you don't want to stick around for this, do not have to. Do feel free, though, to go and have a look, as I said last time, online for some past papers from your exam board. See if you can find the mark scheme. See if some of this information, some of these quotations that we've used throughout this session can help you answer some exam questions based around family and relationships. For those doing AQA, make sure that you are listening up with a pen at the ready, because there are some changes. There is a new 1 mark question. Now, this is not in replacement of the multiple choice like I said it was in the last session. Apologies, I had misread. This is a new 1 mark question, which is coming in to replace a different question altogether. It's not something that requires any huge levels of development. It might even be that it's just a key word or a definition or something that just shows you understand what happened in a particular story. This is actually in replacement of the 2-mark questions. The idea is if we've removed 1 mark from this question, it allows us to add that extra mark into the 6-mark question that we looked at last time. If you haven't seen that video yet, please do go back and look at the social justice one. At the end there, we do break down that 6-mark question that is coming to the AQA exam in 2026. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to show you a list of different examples that came from the exam board directly. Now, we have here these questions that come from the Family and Relationships unit. Now, the answers to these questions do not have to be complicated. Give 1 belief about marriage, it's for life. Give 1 reason why Christians disagree with divorce, it's breaking a promise with God. Give 1 religious belief about the nature of family, it should be 2 people who are married, which is exactly the answer that I've given you here. Now, there's a few things here that is worth noting. When we've spoken about the themes questions in AQA, we've spoken about the importance of specifying religious belief about the nature of family. As question, for example, you do not need to do so. You do not need to have any reference to specific religion, you just need to give a general statement. It needs to be a short sentence. It should not take you any more than 30 seconds. Obviously, as much time as you can save in these smaller questions gives you even more time in those 12 and 15 mark answers. For any other information on any of the exam questions or any of the changes that are coming in the next year, please go to the AQA website and you'll see there's a little downloadable file which is called Answers and Commentaries for Updated Items. If you download that, it gives you the full rundown of what the new question types are, how they're going to be marked, as well as some example questions and answers for you to try and get used to them. Thank you very much, guys. That is the end of this session. I hope it has been helpful. If you weren't part of the AQA, again, please do go and have a look for some past questions. Have a go and see if you can find some mark schemes using the information from this lesson. Thank you very much, guys, and I will see you in the next one.